Hello, I'm BlueBlob0 and this is my new series where we're looking into different video games, analysing as to whether they are or are not really video games. Today we're going to be looking at the general principles of what I think makes up a video game, and then in future we will be looking at 5 video games, which are Thomas Was Alone, Proteus, Antichamber, Dearest and Magicka. Games which you may or may not be familiar with, and I'll be analysing each one of them in a separate video. So now you're probably wondering, why am I talking about video games? What qualifications do I have to talk about video games? So I'm a university student studying computer game technology, and I'm going to use my experience from this, playing video games, as well as a book called The Fundamentals of Game Design by Ernest Adams and Andrew Rawlings, to see if I can provide some basis for what I think is a video game. And that is the question for today, and then we'll be using this basis obviously to look at those other games. So there's no simple solid answer to the question of a video game, but there's different things that you have to have in a game. One of the things that I think is kind of really important is some sort of goal in your game. If you don't have a goal in your game, there's no point to doing it. It's really not really a game. You're really just doing random acts, and it's not really progressing towards a final goal. The goal can be anything from saving a princess, killing someone in particular, going from A to B and the journey, but there should always be some sort of final place, goal, aim that you aim towards. The goal will not always be something that you can actually get to. For example, in SimCity, you have to build a city without going bankrupt. Or in Space Invaders, you have to save the world by destroying all the aliens, but there's actually an endless number of aliens. So something that's just you not dying is the goal there. So our first thing was a goal. Another thing is what actually gets you to the goal, and that's the gameplay. Now, gameplay is something where you have a number of different tasks that you can complete, and you've got to think about the task and then the actions to complete the task. Now, first you've got to think about what makes up a task in a game. If you've got a game that just has a goal and no task to get to there, just walk from A to B and there's no challenge or task or anything to actually that is the reason why you're going from A to B, then it's still not really a game, even if it does have that goal. But the thing is, what really is a task? Can a task be climbing over some rocks, or does it have to be more simple as actually solving the puzzle to get over the rocks? Well, I felt something that, although is in tune with the general flow of the game, might be slightly something different or from this normal flow. So if the normal flow of the game would be just to walk down the path, then it might be that you actually have to turn and look away from directly down the path and do a puzzle, or even just turn and look, and maybe in a point and click adventure you have to turn and look at a specific thing and click on a specific object in a certain order. Something really simple, but something that's just, even though it's still within the game, kind of changes it a bit and there's something different. Another example in an actual game is Space Invaders. So the goal you've got is to kill the alien invaders, and we've already established that it's actually impossible to kill them all. You've got moving left and right is the basic things you can do there, and you've got a basic task where you've got to kill each of the aliens is one thing that you could say is a task. Once you've kind of got that, that's then generally the flow of the game, and you could say that the task is more killing the mothership of the alien as opposed to killing the actual aliens, because that's like an extra task and it's different to the general flow of the game, which is moving left and right, just killing the aliens that move left and right, whereas the mothership flows once and doesn't come back on the screen. So once we've thought about the task, you've got to think about what actions you actually have got to address the task. And is it really a task if there's only one action to complete? So in Space Invaders, you do only have the option to shoot, not to shoot, or to move left and right. Now, at first that kind of seems to be only one action, but you've actually got the option to be in lots of different places, to shoot from different places. You've got to think about where you're shooting. It's not just something simple as you just mash the shoot button and stay in the same place. You've actually got to be able to aim and know where you're shooting. And the task of killing the mothership, you've got to actually plan out that and actually try and hit it if you want to hit it. Or you have to tend to. Sometimes you're lucky and just manage to get an extra shot. So there's the task. So I think that tasks are very important in a game, and a video game can't be a game if it's got a goal and then it's got some tasks that take you to that goal, each with having different actions. Maybe you have a puzzle, there's only one way to complete the puzzle, but there might be different ways to interact with it, or even different paths to take within the game to get to a task. If there's like a task, you can go different paths. That also gives you a different way of approaching each task. So next we have the story. Now, I feel that every game has to really have some sort of story, however small. Now, you're probably thinking there's games that don't have any story, and we'll get into that in a sec. But firstly, I just want to explain what normally the story does. So normally the story either gives you your final goal, so the game will start and it'll show here's the end point, but we want to find out what's over there, go over there, and that would just be your goal. It could give you the idea of the rules of the game that are hidden underneath the game, because normally in a video game we don't necessarily see the rules of the game. Like, you can only walk left and right, or they're not normally given to you straight away, and sometimes there's a tutorial, but sometimes they're like hidden. There are hidden rules that you don't necessarily know. You can't walk over a cliff and stuff that you actually have to find out. But the story might explain some of those rules, and the story might be progressing and show you each task as you go along, and the story might explain why you need to do each task to get to the final goal. But the story can just be simple. Start of the game, it just says you are here, and maybe it doesn't even explain the goal, it just says you are here, and it says a little bit, even a short passage about why you're there, and then you just play through and eventually get to the goal, which will just be progressing through the game in a certain way. So that's something to think about. Now, in Space Invaders, most people know that you have to save the Earth from the invaders, and that's kind of your basic story. But there is kind of the idea that you can actually add story elements that aren't necessarily something that's put in by the developer, as long as the game mechanics are good enough. So with Space Invaders, you have the mothership that goes along, as we discussed earlier. Now, the mothership doesn't necessarily have any story to it. However, you could interpret that killing the mothership now means that you prevent extra aliens from being taken off of the mothership later on, and so it makes the job of saving Earth easier. While this doesn't actually have an effect in-game, it's a story, because the mechanics are strong, it's a story that you can kind of form if you kind of think about and imagine. And there's other games like that. So Tetris, we discussed earlier, games that you probably think don't have a story, and Tetris is probably one of them, and really it doesn't have what you'd think of as like a conventional story. However, the mechanics of Tetris are sound enough, you've got enough actions, your goal is to not reach the top of the thing, then maybe you could kind of build some sort of story around it. Maybe it's some strange building technique where if you're building up your pillar maybe in a house, if the pillar gets to the top without being stable, then the house will fall down, so you're not allowed that to happen. And each time you make a row that goes into the pillar and is another stable place in the pillar, and you've just got to make your pillar as tall as you can. Now, another question, we've discussed how mechanics can kind of help you make a story. Can your story carry the game if it doesn't have any gameplay? So this is kind of something interesting. So you might have a goal, but maybe there's nothing to get to the goal, and it's just a story getting to the goal. Is that really gameplay? Well, I think really not, and I don't think that really is a video game if there's not really any gameplay, or maybe even if there's not a goal. I think it's more of an interactive experience. So you're going through on an experience, not really a game. It's interactive in certain ways, maybe not necessarily 100% interactive, maybe you're just even doing one thing, but because it's like this, more or less it's going to be an interaction, it's going to be an experience. So, all these different things that I've discussed is very, very complex. There's not just one simple thing. And so it's not going to be, I'm not going to look at a game and I'm going to go, yes, this is a game, no, this isn't a game at the end of the video. And I'm not going to rate it 0% a game, 5% a game, 97% a game, 100% a game. Because even that is kind of, there's nothing really, you can't say this is 97% of the game because 3% of the game you don't have a goal for, or something like that. It doesn't really work like that. What I'm going to be looking at, whether the game is more like an interactive experience or more like a video game, and I believe that some games are kind of a mix, kind of more of a video game experience maybe. They kind of have everything you think of a video game, but also a really good story, and maybe parts that make them more an interactive experience. And I will just be discussing the pros and cons and then giving my opinion at the end of what I think it kind of more is. But I won't be giving any really definitive answer because I don't think there really is, and I think sometimes it depends on what the person's definition of certain things are. So I hope to see you in my future videos where I'll be looking at all the different games that have been going on in the background of this video, and I'll see you then. Thank you for watching. Bye.